Hello guys, today I'm going to talk a bit about Aikido. Having watched another video about this made by Rokas, and surprisingly finally some video which made sense where he was talking about Aikido, where I quite often ask him not to talk about Aikido directly on his YouTube, but he asked people to write him a comment what is wrong with Aikido. And I decided it's just gonna take me too long to write it, so I decided just to make a video. I do apologize if the sound jumps, but this is just recording on my phone, so I'll be moving back and forth. I'm not promising anything. But when people talk about Aikido, and quite often it comes up with in conversations, so my background in martial arts is a few years of wushu, the old style kind of Soviet Union based wushu, which looked more like boxing with a bit of kicks. Then I found out about Aikido, not from Steven Seagal movies. Then when I got the opportunity arose, I started training Aikido all the way back in Ukraine, and I have spent a few years training Aikido in a gym which was in my home city of Kherson in Ukraine. It was not far from a place called Три Штыка, which is generally translated as three spikes. People who might know that area will recognize what I'm talking about. But overall, after moving to Europe, I have found that the way I was taught Aikido in Ukraine by my teacher, a original teacher, and the way that Aikido is being trained in many places I visited in Europe, as I have continued training Aikido for a while, not just Aikido but a couple of other martial arts. I then moved on and I also did historical European martial arts. So I'm reasonably comfortable with not being hit by a sword while having one on my own in my hands. And there's lots of conversation popped up over from Aikidokas and on Aikidokas Point. I was hoping to make a bigger video on this subject once I got more into rolling with people from different gyms. So this is a Pulse team in Stuttgart. That's when I will move to Germany. I also rode a bit around Berlin. It's IMAG gym, which is up in a kind of closer to the center of Stuttgart, of Berlin, and one which is right Bulldog gym, I believe. I might not be wrong. I'll have to look it up later, but I've rolled in a few MMA gyms as well, and conversations about Aikido came up, and from what I can see and what I'd like to speak about, and from my experience, there is a few issues of Aikido which nobody seems to be addressing. So some of them are well known. So for example, a lack of sparring, and I know there will be an Aikidoka who will say, ha, but the founder of Aikido was against competition. And I will say that, yeah, they were right. But the founder of Aikido also brought in a practice of randori into Aikido, which is actually a Japanese way of talking about sparring. So you can have a light sparring, you can have a heavier sparring, depending on how proficient you are, or depending how well do you trust the person that you're sparring with. The same practice exists in judo, so again, it's called the same thing, randori, and people just spar. It's a free-flowing kind of exercise where you try to do your thing, somebody tries to do their thing. So that's a few technical things. We're going to go through some technical things as we go along. So the second major technical thing which I have noticed in a lot of Aikido schools, well, most of the European Aikido schools, and a lot of things in some of the people who make videos, is the lack of footwork training. So, for example, if you learn Aikido, what you understand is if somebody comes at me and they try to grab me or anything like this, my idea is to timing, posture, position. You can put them in any order, but they all have a meaning. And what you quite often watch, if you watch a video by, was it Christopher Hein, I believe, Rokas has mentioned, or whether it's from Road Warriors, or whether it's from the guys from AikiFlow, right? They all kind of concentrate on what your hands are doing, but they nobody concentrates on what your feet are doing. I think over the time many Aikidokas thought that, while you're training these techniques, these sequences, you will also train footwork. BS. That's a full pile of BS, because you do need to have some exercises which concentrate specifically on your footwork. And you don't really have to just listen to me or to Aikidokas. Just boxing, for example, I had a pleasure of watching a gentleman called Marvin Cook. He made his videos a few years ago when he talks about movement in the true boxer stance, which is this. Surprisingly, true boxer stance is nearly identical to an Aikido stance, which is this. So outside of having your hands here to having your hands here, the stance does not change. Yet there is a whole staff of things you have to get used to and you have to concentrate on when doing your footwork, which I have not seen people doing any exercises on them. And to give you an example, we would get an exercise where somebody takes me and they say, all we would do is simply change our line. Which also another thing which you get in many Aikido schools, people do not understand the idea of the line of the attack. What does it show in? For example, I was doing with people exercise with weapons, with swords, and they were quite often pointing the sword in any direction except in the line of their possible attacks. So because of the lack of these understandings, people simply will not be able to perform the techniques, to be honest, right? So these things need to be brought back. People need to start doing sparring. People need to start working on their footwork and positioning. Why is this so important? Well, if you watch, for example, videos by Road Warriors, by Lenny Sly, I believe, you can watch his students trying actual sparring for the first time in their lives, where they were just kind of punching each other. Fair enough, they went more all out rather than gradual walking into it, but they went on just as soon as the fist started flying. That's it. You just get stuck in kind of this tunnel vision. It's very hard to work on this. So this needs to be worked on. To give you an example, the way I worked on my footwork when I was going more to roll with people from other schools is, for example, when I was going to the gym in Stuttgart, we were having a discussion with the gentleman who did Gracie wrestling or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, whichever you name it. They were saying that because I was rolling that with them without a gi, they would say they would not want to grab me on my hands because I automatically was kind of trying to pull some hand technique, for which I had to kind of calm them down and say, hey guys, you know what? I have not trained for a while properly, so I'm probably away from doing those hand techniques very much, but what I'm trying to do is this, and it's essentially if they were trying to grab my hand to do a pull through or something else like this, my idea was to always just change the line. Change the position, change the line. That's how you train it. It's very easy. It's not hard. So, what's other things? One of the things we get in the way they train things as well is that was the idea which kind of moved on probably from Japan. I'm not 100% sure, but they will train 5-6 technique every night, so sometimes less, so let's say 3-4. What happens is people come to the training, they warm up, so obviously they don't work on their basics, not much helpful, and then what they get done is somebody would teach them, and that was actually something which even happened in Ukraine, and was only later I understood this as actual shortcoming for Aikido training, is they would teach, somebody would teach you 3, 4, 5 techniques, and you would spend probably 10 minutes training it, 5 minutes one person, the other 5 minutes another person. So in total out of the 10 minutes you actually spend training those techniques, it will be like only 5 minutes that you train them personally. And this means that you're coming out from the training seeing this is such a great technique, but you will never be able to use it. And what happens next is you come into the next training and you get taught a completely different set of techniques. So now you've got 3, 4, 5, depending on how long your lesson is, different techniques. And what happens then is you coming out, so now you've got like another bunch of great stuff. Oh wow, shit. When I'm training it works really well, yeah. But can I actually do them? Well, no, because I don't know the basics. Well, I did, so thank you very much to my first coach, whose name I remember was Rahman, but I don't remember his last name. But thank him, I'm still grateful to him to these days. And also you get like this, and every time, so you will tend to relearn some techniques, but it will be like 3, 4, 5 lessons later, and they will not always be taught in the same order. So which it means is that many people simply get overwhelmed by the amount of techniques. One of the things I think Aikidokas, unlike teaching in Japan where people learning Aikido as a way to learn different martial arts techniques, but not something they expect to use in the first 5-6 years of their training, really the people who teach Aikido really need to start concentrating on, for this few weeks, we're not talking couple of trainings, we're talking about 3-4 weeks, I'm going to concentrate on this particular technique, and I'm going to spend most of my time teaching just that. So that by the passage of these 3-4 weeks, I would say probably good enough. It's about 2-3 trainings a week, so you know, somebody can actually kind of say, I can use it. So that's when these techniques start getting practical. That's when people start understanding them and being able to use them. Obviously, the very good example is when people start telling you, Tokyo police is being taught Aikido and they're using it very well. What some people forget to mention, or quite often do not know, is that for the Tokyo police, the person who developed the Aikido training for the Tokyo police, he selected about 9 techniques, and they spend most of the time learning just those 9 techniques. That's it, nothing more. Everything else is just kind of a bit of extra, but they're concentrating on those 9 techniques, and they can do them very well, because guess what? It's only 9 techniques. Very same as boxing. In boxing you have what? You have jab, cross, hook, uppercut, or maybe you get an overhead if you're really brave, but that's it. You got these and you got this from the other side. So okay, that's it. There's a few techniques. That's why 6 months later, if you do get into a fight, guess what? You can do those, six strikes, and then you can combine them slowly as well, especially if you work on your footwork. They don't do this in Aikido, right? And that comes across, so this means that people who come out of this they are incapable of doing those techniques. Right? What are the things? Well, one thing I wanted to mention now, which is, again, if you watch videos, because of so much stuff happening in their head, you watch videos, for example, the gentleman Rokus mentioned, he has some videos online, and the last video he pointed, and you see that his students they end up stuck into this kind of essentially wrestling, kiddie wrestling, instead of working on their basics, instead of working on their footwork, and they just get in this tunnel thing, which is, I think the video he made was where they were wrestling for a stick, and you see this tunnel, I have to hold this stick, I have to be in here, instead of doing somebody's attacking you, doing a Aikido thing, which is, I have to kind of turn my entire body, so instead of wrestling his arms for a stick, with my arms, I can wrestle him out with my entire body, right? So that's the idea of this getting the right timing, getting the right posture, getting the right position, so that you use your entire body in the matter of a fight, whatever happens, instead of just relying on your grip or something else like this. One other thing which I have noticed in Aikido, and that is this kind of, from the athletic side of things, so people who do sports and stuff like this, they say, Aikido techniques do not work against a resistant opponent. And this is probably the biggest BS that comes across, and quite often doesn't make sense. Why? Well, the resistant opponent is very simple. Let's say you're attacking me and I do the following thing. I ran away. That's resisting, okay? So if somebody's attacking you and you're trying to stop him, that's resisting. Yes, using Aikido, you can beat that opponent. That's why there is atame in Aikido. So if somebody is not letting you bring them down, you do what the boxer would do. You just punch him in the face, kick him in the knee, and then bring him down. Works perfectly well, but the idea of Aikido is that, well, I'm not the attacking guy. So we have to get into this idea of an attacking opponent. So the person that actually attacks you. Unfortunately, in Aikido, many people turned into what I call AikiMonkeys. It says monkey see, monkey do, monkey doesn't effing think. And why am I saying that? Well, many people, they see the demonstration of the technique and they will think, oh yeah, if he does something like this, I have to fall. What does it do? What happens is quite often, and people go upset with me in some Aikido schools because I didn't do it, is they would do a technique and they would expect the person to fall. Right? The person will fall no matter how correct or incorrect the technique was. Instead of being just either attacking, so I'm grabbing you, I'm giving you energy, or I'm pulling you, or whatever, something like this. Yes, you don't have to keep on throwing punches, but non-resistance means that once you gave them that energy, once you attacked them, you just don't go punching them. You letting them do the technique on you, whatever is it that they're doing, and if it goes fine, then you roll. So you use your skills you learn in rolling, it was in jumping, just falling, like you fall, and you use this opportunity to practice your break falls. That's why quite often these things look so beautiful, because once you do the throw, and if the throw works, the other person, once he gets to a certain position, instead of just falling like a sack of excrement, he uses that opportunity to just jump across and fall just in a way so that he can keep himself safe while falling. But when people don't do this in a way that helps the other person to understand the technique, when they fall no matter what, guess what happens? Right, the person has got no idea how to do the technique. He knows the motions. His partner makes it look pretty, but they just can't do it when it comes to real life. Again, a very interesting example. I was watching Aikido versus Karate. They had a little run around. And you had an Aikidoka trying to do a technique which is supposedly to be like done by actually kind of sitting down and turning in. So similar to kategayashi, they call it. Right, so, but in the same time, he kind of put the karateka in a very awkward position, and they just kept on running around the gym, and he couldn't throw him because he just did it completely wrong, and he didn't understand what he was doing wrong. And quite often you see as well, even myself, I got caught out in positions where I do something, was like, hey, I'm doing something wrong. I was rolling with people from Gracie Wrestling. I was like, hey, I'm doing something wrong. Okay, I'm just going to do something different, and it worked. Or it didn't work and I got slammed into the ground. That works as well. That happens. But people who just fall no matter what, they're not helping. I had people in Aikido gyms being very angry with me because they would do something really wrong, to the point where, while not resisting, I was just not feeling that, like, hey, it's not that I don't have to fall, it's just like you're completely doing it, something which is, I don't even feel the pressure, what you're doing. And they still would be like, hey, you have to fall. So this needs to go. The AikiMonkeys need to go. You are not helping other people. Right? You have to give a true feedback to the point of what is the person doing. Because if people just falling and just kind of rolling out of something when it didn't do anything, it just gives people a false sense of security. And a false sense of, hey, I can do that. I'm great at that. So now we had somebody who didn't practice the basics, who never had any sparring matches, so he never really had more or less like half live attacks, so you don't have to spar full power. And that, like I said, what I'd like to say is that the idea of sparring seems to be misunderstood, not just only in Aikido world. The idea of sparring seems to be quite misunderstood even by many people who do sports martial arts or like Gracie Wrestling, or whether they do MMA. They quite often see it as a competition. I have to win this. I have to be unbeatable even when I'm rolling with somebody during training. It's like, that's the kind of, seems to be the idea that many Aikidokas have about this. So, but now they've never practiced, they never rolled on this, and now they have people who simply fall no matter what, just because they've been shown that, hey, you fall once this person steps here. Right, so with all this, these are the kind of basics, but once these structures change, I believe that the training of Aikido is gonna change significantly. Right, we have to have enough respect to each other to say, hey, something is not working right for me. Hey, your basics are not working too well for me. Things like this. So that's my view on this subject. I think I went way longer than I expected. I can't imagine having to write all that. But this is probably a start. I'll probably try to make a few videos just to cover a few other basics as I see them, including those ideas about like sparring and rolling. And I hope that helps you. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Take care.